Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Today I'm looking at an industrial tank engine from Hornby. I've always said that a change in livery can completely transform a locomotive. That's certainly true of the Hornby W4 Peckett, and that's why I bought 4 of them, because they're all so different thanks to the change in livery. I don't know whether that's true of the Hornby B2 Peckett though, that's the 060 version, because I've only ever reviewed one of those. If it is true, then I could have missed out on quite a lot, so today I've decided to try another. And here it is. It is a B2 Peckett, not in a green as I've seen before, but in an NCB blue livery. The RRP is quite different from when I reviewed my green Peckett though. The latest RRP for these is £139.49, which is obviously quite a lot more than the green Peckett, which was £109.99 in 2019 when I first reviewed it. But that's only an increase of 27%, and by inflation that increase should actually have been more. I assume the price I've just quoted for this loco is a little bit out of date, which would probably explain it, but even so it's nice to see a loco lagging behind the rate of inflation for a change. Anyway, I didn't pay £140 for this. Hatton's had this on sale for £101, and in fact they still have it in stock at that price, so if you're interested I'll pop an affiliate link in the description for you. They've also got a very nice looking green version, which again looks completely different. That one's a little more expensive at £109. But I've got this one. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this is like. Let's try another 060 Peckett for the first time in years. Let's get started. Everybody knows that the Hornby Pecketts are awesome, and that's certainly what I remember of the B2 Pecketts, to the point where I still talk about them today in my reviews as a benchmark of what a good tank engine should be. But of course it's been about 4 years since I last reviewed one of these, and there have been a lot of new releases in that time. So for me, I'm going to be very interested to see whether these Pecketts still hold up against more recent releases, or whether they are starting to lag behind a bit now. I suspect they will probably still impress, but that's what I want to find out. Let me show you the end of the box then. So the product code for this is R3870. It is the NCB Peckett B2, the Earl. It does have a name, which is cool, and it's number 1203. And I do like the Hornby packaging because if I flip it over, right away you can see a bit about the loco you're buying. So pause and read that if you'd like to, although I will tell you a bit about the B2s later on. For now though, I've only seen this loco as a photo on the front of the box. I haven't seen the actual model yet. So let's take the sleeve off, which is a very tight one. Oh, it's incredibly tight, hang on. And reveal the loco, if possible, if you're strong enough. Wow, I tell you what, straight away, that's a surprise. Don't know if you can see there, but the colour of the loco is completely different from the colour of the loco on the packaging. Yeah, that's a much darker blue. This is more of a baby blue, and I have to say, I prefer the blue of the loco. Look at that. Yeah, that actually pops a lot more than the box would have you believe. That looks awesome. I love it. Right, well, let's pull this all out then, and let's find out what you get. So there's the blister pack with the loco in it, or the clamshell rather. And then we've got some paperwork for the Peckett B2. Let's open it up, see if it tells us more about the mechanism. Well, not a huge amount. You've got lubrication points, fairly standard. Body removal, yeah, well, I do know that these are quite easy to service, which is another reason why the Hornby Pecketts are awesome. They kept it simple, and that did them a lot of favours. And they are DCC ready. You need a 6-pin decoder, I believe, if you want to chip these. And yeah, you can see a bit of the mechanism there. And then on the back, yeah, nothing much to speak of. So let's have a look and see if we get any accessories with this. Oh, we don't actually. Yeah, I suppose not. Yeah, everything's fitted to the loco and the couplings are pre-installed. So yeah, no accessories. I was kind of hoping that you would get some etched nameplates or something with this, because even the Hornby Railroad Plus locos now come with etched nameplates. So fingers crossed they will be already applied, probably doubting it though. Right, what's the finish like? You ready? Oh yeah, quite nice. A little bit matte, I suppose. I'm pretty sure the tanks there are die-cast, so a little bit surprising that the finish isn't slightly better than that, but the colour is certainly lovely, isn't it? Right, let's lift this up. Yeah, you know what? These are still at the top of their game in terms of weight. For the size of this tank engine, the amount of weight packed into this is incredible. And yeah, the reason is the running plate is metal and the tanks are metal. And it really does weigh an awful lot. I'll get this on the scales in just a moment for you, but I can already tell that there are going to be much larger tank engines in my collection than this that weigh less than this does. Yeah, it's a very, very impressive weight. Yeah, the livery is lovely. It's quite simple in that there's not that much lining on it, but there are so many different coloured components such as the rods, the nameplate, the pipework, the top of the chimney, whistles, safety valves, cam detail, that it still looks like an interesting and varied livery, which I like very much. And yes, the shade of blue is certainly very pleasing in person. So I think this ought to be pretty good. I'm going to show you all of the detail and features on this in just a second. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about the B2s in real life. The Peckett Class B2 was first introduced by Peckett & Sons in 1905. It was one of 3 variations of the Peckett B Class, all of which were similar 060 saddle tank engines. The design originated way back in 1880 with the introduction of the Peckett B1. Over the next few decades, the B1 design was altered and improved, and come 1905, all of these major upgrades led to the introduction of the larger B2. In total, only 40 were built over the following 26 years, and they weren't really churning them out either, since no more than 4 were ever built in a single year. Peckett & Sons mainly produced locomotives for collieries, ironworks or similar industrial premises. They continued to do this quite successfully for many years until 1958, when their last ever steam locomotive was produced. In 1961, the company was taken over by the Reed Crane and Hoist Company, which also went bust before too long. 3 B2s survived to this day, although the remainder were most likely scrapped. So there she is, up close and personal for you, the Earl Hornby's B2 Peckett in all of her glory. And yeah, I think this loco is awesome, and that fact was obvious from the very moment I pulled it out of its packaging. It was a great first impression because immediately you notice the weight and the quality. It doesn't feel like a cheap plasticky bit of tat as some locos do, which is important when models cost quite a lot of money, as this one does now. Yeah, it just immediately feels as though you've got your money's worth, which is great. This loco is also considerably different from the old B2 Peckett that I have. Yes, in terms of livery, and I'll talk all about the decoration in just a second, but the handrail on the front of the tanks is different. You've got a curved one here on the Earl, yet my green Peckett had a straight handrail, so there are tooling variations in these models, which is quite impressive as always, and that's why I like buying another version of the same model, because I would have missed out on that otherwise. And there are also improvements to this loco, such as the chimney, which is just made of plastic, but the copper paint used on that looks to be of a really high quality. In fact, it's much more convincing than on the previous B2 that I looked at, and that was one thing I criticised on that original B2. I said the metalwork looks too plasticky. The fact that this looks so good shows that Hornby have taken that criticism on board, which is fantastic to see, and that's another reason why I think it's useful to buy another version of the same model later down the line and re-review it. So it's looking pretty good from the start. So let's talk about the decoration then. I would say the finish on this isn't quite as good as on the old Peckett, but it's not too bad. I do prefer a slightly more satin finish than this though. You do, however, have the painted detail on the side of the cab. Looks like a builder's plate, very, very tiny, although no doubt the close-up lens will pick those up. The Earl nameplate, alas, is unfortunately just a print. It would have been lovely to have had an etched version of this included. Again, with the latest RRPs being 140 odd pounds, I think that wouldn't be too much to ask for, but I suppose the quality of the paint on this painted nameplate isn't too bad. The various rods and pipework all stand out as well as a result of being painted into a different colour, and the coupling rods and connecting rod also look fantastic as well in that red colour, which contrasts with the wheels, which are painted in the same blue as the rest of the loco, and they are great wheels as well, fully moulded right down to the axles so that they look really nice and realistic. I also like the way the smokebox area is painted black. Again, that contrasts with the blue very nicely. You've got the red painted running plate with all the riveting on it, and then the buffer housings themselves are painted black, which again brings some nice contrast. And of course then you've got the metal buffers, which are excellent looking. Again, they look high quality with that shiny metal finish, although unfortunately they are not sprung, which again is a bit of a pity given that these models are now quite a bit more expensive than they used to be. I don't know whether that's because of how thin the buffer beams are. Obviously there's no room for any spring or anything inside there. It would all have to be contained within the buffer. So it's not a big deal, of course, but that is a feature that you might expect to see from another loco of this price. The smokebox has the separately fitted handle on it, which is a very fine piece, and you've also got the little lamp bracket up at the top as well, which is separately fitted. The cylinders are particularly impressive here because they are absolutely tiny, yet you've got the drain cocks fitted to them and a little valve on the end as well, which again seems like a separately fitted piece. Really quite impressive. The tanks are detailed too, lots of riveting on here. You've also got the separately fitted wire handrails, little details on the top, including the safety valves, which I think are made of plastic, but really the quality of the paint on these parts is certainly not bad. And then up on top of the cab, the whistle here, I would say is probably made of metal because the finish there is great. So again, you've got a sense of quality from this loco. In terms of the cab, you've got glazing on the windows, although these are not individually glazed. If you look inside, you can see we have a single glazing piece bridging the windows. Again, it's not as convincing as individually glazed, but it doesn't look too bad, I suppose. And then the cab detail itself is absolutely wonderful. You've got loads of separate components there, all separately painted, little turning wheels, the regulator, pipework, gauges. This is quite an enclosed cab, and so the level of detail there is really good to see. Around the back of the cab, you've got a separately fitted coal load, which is removable. So if you wanted to, you could add sort of crushed coal or something like that. That would be fun. And then we've got another similarly detailed buffer beam. I should point out there are no chain link couplings provided to fit to these. Again, I think that's a pity. I don't think it would have hurt to have included those. And another impressive feature is if you look behind these rods and pipes and such, there is even detail on the boiler. Yeah, you can see it. It's got the banding on it, and there's also the suspension springs as well. I might struggle to get a good shot of that, but they are there. What a detailed model this is. I should also say that the quality, as usual, on these Pecketts from Hornby is second to none. No wonky details. I mean, have you seen any? Comment down below if you have. I've not noticed any at all. No visible glue, no scuffs in the paintwork, no fingerprints, nothing like that. It's a very, very high quality loco. So yes, it's quite expensive. The price has been increased over the years, only really in line with inflation though, slightly below in fact. So I don't think the value is any worse these days than it used to be. It's a high quality tank engine. There's a lot more metal on it than there is on other products of a similar price. And in fact, the weight is great, 176 grams versus the 128 grams of the 040 Peckett. That is more than the Rapido Hunslet, which was a similar sort of price and certainly a larger loco than this. And it's 20 grams more than the EFE Rail Class 02, which is much larger than this, yet much lighter. So great weight, great quality, fantastic level of detail, and a beautiful paint job. So overall, it's a massive thumbs up. But now we need to move on to the performance. Let's take a look at the mechanism, and let's also see how this loco runs. So there she is, the Earl, down onto the track, and I've already filmed the first performance test, and I will show you how that went in just a second. First of all though, let's talk a little bit about the mechanism and the quality of it, and I'm pleased to say that yeah, the quality of the mechanism is actually very high considering the size of the loco, and while some aspects of the detailing and such, the lack of lights or whatever, they may be behind other manufacturers now, I still think the quality of this mechanism is at the top of its game compared with other similar sort of saddle tank engines of this size. So let's start with the pickups. As you can see, every wheel on the model does have pickups on it. You can't really ask for any better than that. So yeah, all-wheel pickup. The base keeper plate is very easily removable, just 2 screws, one at either end, and you can pull that off completely, mind you. It's not hardwired, so you can fully remove it to clean the pickups, and also access the axles, which are encased in proper turned metal bearings. Very high quality feature. Those are on every single axle, and it's just driven by the center axle, and being driven by the center axle means that it's nice and balanced as well. Body removal is similarly very simple. You just have to pop one of the couplings off, and there's a screw underneath there, and you can access the screw at the other end without having to take anything off. Pulling the chassis out, you can see that it's a very chunky chassis actually, die-cast of course, and because it's relatively bare bones and feature-free, I guess they have been able to pack some extra weight into this. But there is no speaker fitted to this model, no lights in the firebox or anything like that. The motor, unfortunately, is just a 3-pole motor without a flywheel. It is a good 3-pole motor, don't get me wrong, and I have quite a few Hornby locos that use this motor, and not one of them has ever failed, so they seem to be quite long-lasting motors as well. The DCC socket, though, is just kind of loose at the front of the loco, doesn't really stay in place, as you can see. I can imagine it being quite tricky to get a decoder to stay there while you put the body back on, but again, it's a loco quite tight on space. It doesn't seem too much of a bodge, if you ask me. And then the gauging comes in at between 14.2 and 14.3, so just comfortably below the standard. That should allow the locos to handle some pretty tight curves as they would have done in real life. So I suppose with the exception of the motor and the relative lack of features, it is a high quality mechanism on the whole. But how does it run? Well, it's time to reveal that, so let me show you that performance test. Right then, the moment of truth. Does this Peckett run, and is it as good a runner as the other Pecketts I've got in the collection? Let's find out. So, forwards direction, let's give it some juice. Here goes. Look at that, straight away it's off. And yeah, you can just tell immediately that this is going to be a great performer. No stuttering, no noise, perfectly smooth. Let's have a look at the gearing. I'm going to run past at 50% speed. Yes, maybe a little speedy, but you know, it's certainly reasonably sensibly geared, I would say. Oh, it's just marvellously quiet and smooth. Look at that. Right, so obviously, as usual, the loco has not been running at this point, but I will not be surprised if this crawls well. Are you ready? Let's try it. Let's see what the crawl's like right out of the box. Let's give it a little juice. To be honest, I was expecting it to be a little bit better. Yeah, it's just a bit jerky, isn't it? I think with some running in, it might do this a little bit better. But at that speed, it seems to come smooth. Reverse. Struggling a bit in reverse. Now, I do think that these Pecketts just have 3-pole motors from memory, and possibly a 5-pole motor would have done these a little bit better in this case. Obviously there's a bit more space in these than there is in the W4 Peckett, so yeah, if the performance doesn't improve with running in, I will probably say I would have preferred a 5-pole motor, but it also must be said that the 3-pole motors used in these are very high quality. They seem to work really well. They just don't quite deliver the same crawl performance as some other locos do. I think they could have also gotten away with gearing these down a bit to run a touch more slowly, because at the full speed, I would say it's just totally unrealistic. I mean, look at that. It's just never going to happen, is it? So, slightly better gearing, and then they could have used the 3-pole motors, and they would have delivered a better crawl. But at the moment, you know, the slow speed performance is not terrible, but it's a little bit inconsistent at the very slowest speeds. Whether that improves or not is yet to be seen. What's the torque like, though? Always very good on Pecketts usually. Is this one? 250. Yeah. Almost as though there was nothing there at all. Yeah, fights the finger very well indeed. Okay, so how does it get on around the track? Let's see. Let's run it in at 50. Well, I'm no Peckett expert, but I would say that looks rather fast for a Peckett. I think at the very most that would be full speed, wouldn't it? And yet I'm only set to half speed on my model train controller, and it can go a lot faster if I turn it up further than that. So yeah, I would say the gearing isn't the smartest in the world here. These are industrial tank engines, they're not express passenger locos. There's really not much need for these to go much faster than a sort of shunting speed. And you know, if the shunting speed was 50 and you could turn them up and get a bit more of a race out of them, then that would be okay. Yeah, I would say it's a little bit speedy, but perfectly reliable. No derailments, no slowing down, no loss of torque as I get further away from the controller. Seems like an efficient and stable loco, which is very good to see. So this is going to get 30 minutes forwards, then 30 minutes backwards, and then we will come back, couple it up to some rolling stock, and also, of course, retest that crawl and see if it's any better. So don't go anywhere, I'll be back in just a second. Okay, I am back, and yeah, this loco is a pleasure to run. It's no problem at all. You just set it off and off it goes without any problems. No derailments, of course, no cutting out even over the express points, which is really good to see, and also no slowing down at any point on the layout, which is also great to see. But now that this has run in, is the slow speed performance any better? Let's find out. So I'm just going to ease this up. Still easing, saw a bit of a twitch there. Oh yes, it is better. It's a little bit coggy and inconsistent. It does kind of keep pausing, doesn't it? But yeah, that is definitely better than it was to start with. I think we have seen, has it cut out there a bit more? Oh, no, I think it had just stalled. I didn't have to prod it or anything. I do think the slow speed performance was better on the Rapido Hunslet, although the reliability of this loco, thanks to its proper pickups and not some strange axle-based solution, I would say is better. Although, yeah, it seems to be struggling to sustain a crawl here. Let's just ease it up again. Ooh, yeah, that's literally as slow as I can get it to go in reverse, and it's just been running in reverse last thing, so that's odd, isn't it? I can slow down into a crawl, sort of, but yeah, it's just hard to maintain it. So yeah, 5-pole motor, maybe slightly better gearing, and this loco would probably be a better crawler. In forwards though, it's not bad at all. Let me show you the reliability of this loco across the points, because it does have a relatively short wheelbase. So the dead zone is just there. I'm not going to crawl too slowly over it, because I don't want to be too cruel, but let's go for about there. Look at that. So very reliable even on the points. And there are locos in my collection. Oh, you let me down. Yeah, maybe I went a bit slower that time. But yeah, there are locos in my collection that would stop every time on this point. Try a bit faster in reverse. Yeah, well, that's strange. Oh, saved itself. Can do it in forwards without any issues, but slows down and stops in reverse. That's weird. Look at that. Doesn't mind how slow I do it in forwards, but then in reverse. Yeah, it's much worse in reverse. I did it that time. But yeah, that's strange. Anyway, thanks to the loco's weight, the pulling power is quite obviously excellent. It comes in with a tractive effort of 0.26 newtons, which should allow this loco to haul around 18 coaches on straight and level track. I would say that's a lot more than you could reasonably expect of a loco of this size. So pulling power, massive thumbs up. I've set it up with a bit of a coal train, so it's got a rake of open wagons, and we'll see how it gets on with those. Quite a few of these are old and they have quite a bit of drag in them, so it ought to be a good test of this loco's power. Right, still on the dead zone here, so can it resurrect itself? Yes, it can. Let's go couple. Okay. Yeah, not quite as slow and controlled as some locos allow, but certainly wasn't bad, and I suppose the forwards direction is the most important, and yeah, that's miles better than it was. So yeah, definitely run these in then, that's the advice. Running in seems to help them a lot. Nice steady takeoff, look at that, lovely. And then on the middle line, I've got my other B2 Peckett, and there is something strange about this. I'm going to pause my new blue one to show you what that is. So this loco is running at 50% speed. See how controlled and slow that is in reverse? It's the same as well. And it can also crawl really, really nicely. Let's show you that. Yeah, bear in mind it's got coaches now. Yeah, real slow. What about in reverse? Yeah, even in reverse. Perhaps it's even better actually in reverse. But the point is, this one is a lot slower and it can crawl better. And if I didn't know better, I would say maybe the gearing has been changed for the worse on this latest Peckett of mine. Let me show you how fast this one runs at 50. There you go, 50, way faster. Now it could just be that the motor is performing differently in this blue one, but maybe they did change something, I don't know, I'm quite confused, but there's just definitely a big difference. Look how much slower that is. They're both at the same speed there. The blue one considerably faster there, so yeah, I don't know what that's about, it's odd, but that is what it is. And then on the inside line, I've decided to do something that I don't do often enough really, and that is a double header. And we've got the W4s doing this. I'll have to say the speed of these two is much more like the speed of the loco I've reviewed today. And that makes me wonder whether the green Peckett, which runs a lot slower, has just sort of slowed down as I've run it. Maybe the motor has become tired over the last few years. I'd be surprised because it runs fine, so yeah, it's still a mystery, but yeah, maybe this is the speed that they were intended to run at after all. Anyway, let's catch up with the B2, see how it's getting on. And don't forget to see which other locos you can spot. I've got other saddle tanks in the sidings, but there is an odd one out, so see if you can spot what that is. Here she goes up Gordon's Hill. Note the speed at the bottom versus the speed over the curves here, not much difference. And up the incline as well. Again, no noticeable slowing down there. And a lot of other locos do that, and yet this is on the same track, same controller, same everything. So it is a very efficient loco. And at the end of the day, you know, it's missing some of the bells and whistles that you might expect of a loco at this RRP. So, you know, it doesn't have the lights, speakers, sprung buffers, screw link or chain link couplings. You know, it doesn't have anything like that, but it does all of the basics extremely well. So it looks fantastic. It's built to a high standard with a lot of metal. It runs very nicely. It's serviceable. It's got a quality mechanism. So at the end of the day, it's the full package, isn't it? I do think they're pushing it a little bit at £140, but of course, most good retailers wouldn't be charging that. You can expect to pay 10 to 15% lower than that at the most. And obviously the price I paid, £101 from Hatton's, is nothing short of a bargain really for something like this, because like I say, it is the full package. And of course, with this being an industrial tank engine, there's so much choice in terms of livery as well. I've showed just a couple of them on this channel, but like I say, there's another green version as well, which is very nice. And I believe there have been others in the past as well, with possibly more to follow in the future. So it's a versatile tank engine. Provided your era is roughly correct, there's probably going to be one for you if that's what you're interested in. And so I can highly recommend at least taking a look at them, if not buying one for yourself. And if you'd like to do that, I've included an affiliate link in the description for you. And now for some ratings then on Hornby's beautiful Peckett B2 in the NCB blue livery. The level of detail I have knocked down a little bit, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot to celebrate here with the level of detail. You've got the great moulded detail on the body, loads and loads of separately fitted parts on the tanks, underneath the tanks, on the cylinders, inside the cab. It looks absolutely marvellous. However, it doesn't have any lights inside the cab. Most expensive locos of this price point kind of do. It doesn't have chain link couplings, doesn't have sprung buffers, no etched nameplates, and so these things together do have to pull the score down to 3.5 for me, but otherwise it is a highly detailed loco. Performance similarly is very, very good. It's incredibly reliable, nice and smooth and quiet, etc. But it's not quite as good at the slow speeds, and it does tend to race along quite a bit. This is completely different from the green Peckett B2 that I've got, which is much slower and it can crawl better. Now I don't know whether that's just because of a natural variance in the motors or something, or whether something has actually been changed in terms of the motor or gearing. Whatever is the case, this is not as good a runner as the green one, although it is still pretty good, so I've given it 4. The pulling power though is fantastic, 0.26 newtons or 18 coaches on straight and level track. That's actually more than a Bachmann C-Class or a 64XX pannier tank, both larger locos than this. And even the Hornby Railways Black 5 is not as powerful a hauler as this little tiny tank engine is. So pulling power, thanks to all that metal, is absolutely fantastic. The mechanism for me is a 4-star. Again, it's a very high quality mechanism that's very serviceable as well. You can get to every aspect of it to clean and oil, so it's going to last you a long time. It's also got your quality die-cast chassis, all-wheel pickup, bearings on all of the axles, although it doesn't have a 5-pole motor with a flywheel, it's got a 3-pole motor without one. I think that's unfortunate. There might have been space for a better motor in this, and that could have improved the performance, but overall no major complaint on mechanism. And then on quality, I think I am going to give this a 5-star. There's so much metal on this, making the model weigh so much. There's metal details such as the whistle, and the plastic details have been improved so that they look more metallic. I think that might be why I knocked the previous Peckett down on quality. Yeah, that chimney looks a lot better. It's also been very, very well put together. There's no visible glue and no blips in the decoration. Not very often that I give a loco 5-star on quality, but I do think it is deserved in this case. Value for money then, I think the RRP at £139.49 is a little bit expensive given this loco doesn't have lights and speakers and that kind of stuff. So at that price this would be a 3.5 star, but at the £101 that I paid, this is a 5-star. I mean, you cannot go wrong with such a high quality loco for 100 quid. So I've split the difference and given it 4.5. Yeah, generally speaking, at the right price at a decent discount, the value for money here is awesome. Overall then, that is a score of 8.53 out of 10, which is a grade of A. Very pleased to see that. And into the logbook we go, where it is 5th place, so yes, top 5, above the Hornby S15 and below the Hornby J50. Yeah, this loco is pretty much the full package. I think there are more detailed locos out there now that you can buy, but this loco makes up for that deficit in its sheer quality. Well folks, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I tell you, I really enjoyed this one simply because these Pecketts are no trouble. And I've reviewed loads of them now between these two B2s and the 4 W4s that I've looked at, and none of them have been any trouble. They've all worked perfectly straight out of the box, none of them have had any serious damage to speak of, and they've all been priced very reasonably as well. And that's quite rare, isn't it? And yet these Pecketts have achieved that consistently, which is great. So the Hornby Peckett, still as good as ever. I was very impressed when they first came out, and I remain thoroughly impressed now. Like I say, other models have surpassed them, perhaps in terms of detail and features, but a lot of those usually have some sort of quality issue or some fussy mechanism that lets them down. These locos still don't have an Achilles heel, which makes them still one of the best in my opinion. So comment down below, let me know what you think. Do you have any of these Pecketts? Which liveries do you have? If so, which one would you get if you're in the market for one? Please do let me know. For now though, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon for another review. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.